Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
So welcome. Hopefully you're on your holidays. If you haven't started already, hopefully it's coming soon. Hello, Claire, are you there?
Hello, I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Excellent.
In first time, there's something.
How you doing, Claire? You okay?
I am all good, thank you. No abseiling, no school trips, nothing exciting to report, I'm afraid. Just an enjoyable holiday day. I know it is disappointing.
I'm disappointed. I was expecting to hear about 30 kids going abseiling in Peru or something like that.
I'm hoping that you've picked up the mantle for me.
No, not at all. I'm currently in a different location to where I normally am. I'm at my parents' house in Birmingham rather than in Manchester, which is I might start doing this more regularly, just doing the show from different places.
And how are the bins in Birmingham?
I've seen some pretty rough stuff around here. If I have to go, I'll have to fight out off a 4-foot rat, basically. Just to let you know. So yeah, I was just wishing everyone a happy holiday or a happy run up to the holidays. I know some people haven't started yet. I know some people are halfway through. Yeah, it's that glorious time, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And we've had some beautiful weather this last week, so I'm not sure it's going to last long.
No, it's been superb. Right, should we get into it today? So,
yeah, let's crack on.
So, is teaching a creative profession? I think I've got to give some background story as to how I came up with this one. So, I was at the Teachers Talk Radio Connect event over in Manchester a month ago. Superb event. When it happens again next year, make sure everyone comes that you know.
Yeah, I'm going to be there.
Superb, Andrew. It was brilliant. It was really, really good. And we were in the pub afterwards, and someone said this to me. Well, teaching is a creative profession, and I was like, hold on a second. We need to explore this and unpack this because I think it means a lot when you say that, and I think it also kind of has implications for the profession if we view it as that, and then. Just as we were about to unpack it, they had to go. They had to walk off. And it was going to, we'd had quite a heated debate beforehand about some stuff. And I just thought it'd be a brilliant topic because I think it brings quite a few things together with our profession. And it's a really nice avenue for exploring loads of ideas. So yeah, I thought we'd do, I thought it'd be a great thing to talk to you about because also you work in primary, right? And
and I wonder how much this will end up being a bit of a kind of primary second divide in terms of, but I guess I think we probably need to start kind of trying to define a little bit by what we mean by creative, right?
Yeah.
Because I wonder if from my head, what I jump to might be different to in your head what you jump to. In terms of what that looks like, and why my gut instinct is to go, you can't be an effective, and I'm going to use the word primary school teacher because that's all I really know, unless you have got a certain element of creativity inside you, and in terms of what that looks like. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be arty. It doesn't mean you have to be able to create the most wonderful displays that are kind of really creative. But I think in terms of your day-to-day practice, I would definitely, my gut before we start this is to say, creativity matters.
So I was in camp no, wasn't I? When I first suggested this to you, Claire, I was in camp no. I've done a bit of research over, but just a bit of thinking about it, research. I don't know. It's really difficult. I am still leaning to camp no, like at the moment, but I think there's room for exploration.
I might be able to persuade you then.
Yeah, I think there's room for exploration. I think where I'm at is we can get carried away with that. So I don't know whether I'm completely in camp now about it being a creative profession. Do you know what I mean? I don't know whether I'm completely averse to people calling the profession creative, but I think there is a I worry about us getting carried away with that.
No, and I get that because let's be honest, I started when I was trying to think about why do I think it's creative by like running it through AI, right?
Like, yeah.
I mean, is that not how we start all things? Like, why is teaching a creative profession? And number 2 on their list, I'll come back to number 1, but number 2 on their list came out with adapting to different learning styles. I mean, that is a whole different kettle of fish that I do not intend to go down tonight. But you know, I started going, oh, hang on a minute. What do we mean by creative then? Yeah, no, exactly. I see.
So it's really difficult. I mean, the debate originally cropped up on the back end of a discussion about like autonomy, right, within the classroom as well. And I've got some thoughts on autonomy, but like I'm kind of, because really creativity is such a big bracket term, isn't it?
Yeah.
And different people mean different things. So like I've got a few things jotted down. Like, is it originality and innovation? Is it adaptation? Is it problem solving? Is it expression and freedom? Is it professional autonomy? Is it like, do you know what I mean? And I think where I worry is when we say it's about expression and freedom. That's the big one that I worry about when it comes to like people who go, well, it's a creative profession, isn't it, man? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I worry that like in reality, that we can be on quite a dangerous path when we talk about it being a place where you have, like, you know, a profession where you kind of, I'm not saying we shouldn't embrace expression and freedom, but I'm not saying we should rely on it. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that it should be the be all and end all. So that's the one I worry about. The others I don't really have an issue with. You know, originality and innovation, maybe I've got like a bit of a problem with that. Adaptation, superb. Right.
Yeah.
We have to be creative in the moment. Problem solving, awesome. Professional autonomy, that's another one I'm interested in exploring. So like really we need to think about which types of creativity we're happy with and which types we're not. Like you've just suggested, learning styles, right? And actually coming from the primary, secondary, the first question I was going to like pose to you is, would you be happy with someone getting creative with, say, a synthetic phonics program? Right? And how happy would you be with the levels of creativity there in a primary school, right?
Yeah, and that's always a great sticking point, isn't it? Because we know fidelity to a scheme for something that is quite closed procedure, that is very much we need to get children to learn to read, that there's not a lot of creativity in it, right? You can make things fun, you can do silly voices, you can have puppets, you know, but ultimately you're fairly scripted, you're working through a scheme. However, phonics is a means to an end, right? Once you've taught the children to be able to decode, then you want them to have a love of learning. Now, I guess where I'd argue is post the skill of knowing how to break down the sounds to be able to read the digraphs and, you know, to be able to put these things together and to blend. That's when the creativity kicks in. How you get children from, right, I now can decode these words and I now know that these words have meaning, to, oh my goodness, now I'm a reader. I absolutely adore reading because it opens the doorways to exploring things that I've got no way of accessing otherwise. That's for me where the creativity sits in. So actually what we do beyond phonics in terms of, call it guided reading, call it whatever you want to call it, in terms of how we teach reading beyond that, that's what matters. That's what we've got to get right. That's when we look for creativity in terms of how we teach in diversity through our reading curriculum, how we empowering children to see themselves in different ways and to learn about their history or their geography through their reading text. Do you hear what I'm saying? I guess that's me, where the interwoven disciplinaries come together in a way that I would say, when we get it right, and that's got to be meaningful, not forced. And don't get me wrong, we've got it wrong before in the sector. But when you get it right, it's like these lightning bolt moments just happen all over. And you have these children who are just desperate to learn. And that's, I think, when the creativity steps in for me.
Can that be taught, Claire?
Taught to teachers or taught to children?
Yeah, not children, teachers.
So I think you can model good practice. You can encourage staff to see other staff who find it naturally more easy. You can plan in teams alongside each other so that you're not isolated. Some people it definitely comes more naturally to, right? Just like some, so the challenge for primary teachers is they are not going to be experts at teaching everything.
Yeah.
Some are going to be really good at teaching maths, for example, and always find science or computing or whatever it is more of a challenge. So you kind of, or you get all rounders who are okay at everything. Like, it's just the reality. In that when you're trying to teach every area of the national curriculum, there's some things you're more confident and better at than others. So what I think good leadership does is put really good teams together when you've got a school that's big enough to be able to do that, right? So that actually within a key stage or a team, you know, you've got those different strengths. And so it might be that different people plan different areas, and because that plays to their strength, which then enables the other staff to be able to deliver lessons that are of, you know, a good, if not outstanding, lesson. So that actually the general diet is high quality and creative across the whole curriculum.
Yeah.
Before we jump in too much further, should we just quickly have a sponsor break?
Yeah, let's do it. And I'm doing my first one today, aren't I? Ready?
Go for it.
All right. So this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. How was that, Claire?
Very good. Perfect.
My first ad read.
I mean, a round of applause, right? That's what we're asking for.
I've been practicing all day.
So let's jump back in. I'm just aware that time flies by, doesn't it? So what would your response be? I guess I don't know. How does that translate or not translate into a secondary kind of arena?
The secondary arena. Look, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I appreciate this idea of bringing the curriculum to life and having an element of creativity there. I feel like as a middle leader, it's really hard to just leave that to chance. Do you know what I mean? Like leave that to chance, and that's what I really struggle with. This idea that like it could be left to chance, and what does it look like, and how do you do that? Do you know what I mean? And if we don't codify it, then we've just got teachers walk into the classroom who might not be good at it, and then like we got to get them there. Do you know what I mean? And like what that looks like, getting them there. So that's what I struggle with. I mean, would I want someone getting creative with the science curriculum? Definitely at points. Do you know what I mean? Like showing interesting demonstrations, showing like interesting contexts of the kind of scientific principles. You know, do I want someone who's really dry going, well, Newton's first law stipulates, and then essentially like showing nothing about how it works and bringing it to life for the children? No. But then I'm not sure how you codify that. Do you know what I mean? That creative edge. I think maybe here we're talking about that, the innovation and the originality and the expression that then brings it off the page. I'm not sure how you'd codify that, and I really struggle with it because like I come from, I don't know, because of where we're at in terms of secondary recruitment as well. It's like we can't pick and choose like who.
Yeah, so you're going to have non-specialists.
You have to have a non-specialist, and you have to have people who maybe you have to teach this to. Like, do you know what I mean? Like who you just hire because there really literally is the pool there is so low, and you need people in front of kids, and like you either go, oh, I'll wait, and then have like no one in front of a child for months and months and months, and that damages their learning. Or you take someone and you train them, and obviously I can train them to do things like behavior management because it's quite mechanistic actions that you can do. I can possibly train them to teach the curriculum and how to explain well and how to ask questions because it's codified and there's a good methodology to do it. And there's quite well backed kind of ideas out there on how to do it. But what worries me is like I can't teach someone to be creative. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not broken down, and that's difficult. And like and you might have a team of people who you've hired who that's just not there. Do you know what I mean? So I guess that's difficult in the secondary context, and also working together as a team is more difficult in the secondary context because like you tend to teach your own classes that one subject and then go off and co-planning isn't isn't necessarily a thing that we do in lots of secondaries. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
It's not a widespread thing. It's quite we do try as much as we can, but because of the time constraints, it's really difficult thing to build into how we work. So it's a difficult thing, do you know? But then also you can work with people, and that the thing that they're doing, like in terms of creativity, you just can't see how they're doing it, and they can't explain it. They're unable to make it tacit. So I think that's where I'm getting at in terms of secondary. That's the core issue in secondary. So if, we've got process in school, like we know how children learn, and we follow that science of learning. But then when it comes to the creativity side of it, and when it comes to bringing it off the page, it's difficult to teach that, and that's what I worry about when and writing people off because they're not able to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so it's interesting you mentioned behaviour, because I wondered if part of it was that actually when you step away from the script, from the kind of codified, from the kind of on the page, I can make sure everyone's doing this kind of level, there is a risk. And certainly at primary, there is definitely an element of I can take this risk and I can be a bit more creative, imaginative, if I feel like I've got this class really well. And actually, if I can really trust them, if I've built that relationship that I think actually generally behavior is good in a day-to-day level, then I can take the risk and do something a bit more different, maybe a bit more outside the box, and really enjoy that with this group of children. Whereas if you haven't got that, there is definitely that kind of, is this going to be worth it moment? In terms of, I know that a safe lesson will definitely mean that learning takes place. Whereas, taking that risk. And so, I've tried to come into the school and gone, do you know what? Like, good behavior isn't necessarily silent behavior. Like a buzz of learning is still really effective learning. And that might be because you're doing things differently. You might be giving the children a little bit more freedom at times to do a little bit more oracy. So to have some more spoken lessons where there's no written outcome. And for some teachers, especially if you're kind of fairly newly qualified, an early careers teacher, that maybe the fear of, but I haven't got enough work in my books, is that going to be okay? And it's who's the work for? Because ultimately, if the children are learning, and especially when you're thinking of like young children in like key stage 1, so these are like 5, 6, 7-year-olds, if every single lesson had a written outcome, I mean, they are just drained. And that doesn't necessarily reflect what they know, because you could have a child who is phenomenal at history, for example, really enjoys it, really absorbs those facts, but perhaps their writing ability would let them down to be able to show that knowledge. And so I think from a primary perspective, and certainly if you think early years, key stage 1, being creative is sometimes about, how do I allow every child to show their potential in a different way? And that's not about, let's just make a poster for everything, right? Because we all know that we need children to develop the skills. And I've talked about, doing things a bit cross-curricularly. So at times you might do your writing about your geography or history topic. You might bring those things together, certainly. But at other times, it's finding different ways to show what children know and understand and have taken away, that isn't kind of maybe the first thought that people would have.
Yeah, there's sometimes that I think that's the other thing. Like, so a lot of people get a little bit kind of het up about like creativity in our profession because of maybe people going, well, if people look in these books and there's no information in there, someone's going to scrutinize. Do you know what I mean? And the scrutiny around our profession, which then people feel like their autonomy is taken away. They feel like their ability to do what they need to do creative in the classroom is taken away. And I think that is quite an interesting angle to think about it with. And then you might end up not doing some of those things to cater for the needs of those children, because and being creative about that, because you've got this kind of inspection anxiety or scrutiny anxiety or something along those lines. And I think we've been scarred as a profession by that, right? By previous Ofsted regimes, by Ofsted kind of hangovers, which still perpetuate amongst many organizations. Like a lot of leadership teams still think if there's no work in the books and no learning has happened, whereas we know now, if you read Rob Coe's work about performative culture in classrooms and the poor proxies for learning, it's a ridiculous thing to look for, just because they've done some writing. I can get 30 children to copy off the board.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, secondary school teachers. We're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Two of those children might have learned something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 28 won't have learned anything. So so you've got that kind of that angle to it. But then, But then you've got to have like a base level. Like I think what we said about like early career teachers was interesting. You've got to have like a base standard, don't you? Where like I don't know what I'm pointing at is maybe procedural stuff that we should do as practitioners, and then like if you look at like surgery. Like this procedure and process that I have to follow. However, when there's a need for adaptation, that's when the creativity comes in. Maybe there's an element of that as well that we should be thinking about. So to just focus on the creativity would be wrong, because actually there's a fair bit of procedure we've got to get to. And maybe if we codified it where the creativity came in at a certain point, and then you could think about what that looks like. It might be easier to explain to someone, or it might be easier to train someone how to do. Like surgery, obviously, if you deviate from procedure, you wouldn't want to go to your surgeon and go, oh yeah, and the surgeon to go, yeah, I'm going to, I've innovated a surgery for you to remove your appendix. I thought about this last night. I'm going to try it on you. You wouldn't want that, would you? Is it acceptable for a teacher to do that with a child? I don't know.
And I think, and maybe, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because how much does exams and the pressure for the end game play into this?
Yeah.
Because if the purpose of school and education, and this is a little bit deep and philosophical, is to, prepare children to be workers or to pass exams, then what the education looks different. Right? Like, so I saw a teacher tap question that came up, or maybe it was on Twitter, about how much revision versus new knowledge goes into GCSE level lessons at this point in the year. And I was shocked. Like it's less than 50-50. There was a high amount of people just purely doing revision. And I get it. And like practice questions, that was it. Like revision versus practice questions and things like that. And I do get it, because you do need to prepare children to succeed. So my son's in year 6, and every day at the holidays, for 10 minutes and a bit, he's been sitting some maths assessment questions, like some arithmetic and some reasoning ones. Now he is willingly doing that, and that's great. And he's doing that because he doesn't want to lose that quick recall element, and he wants to do his best in his stats, you know, and that's a great attitude to have. But if SATs didn't exist, would he spend his holiday remembering and reminding himself how to, today it was calculating averages and means for various falsified pieces of data, right? That he's unlikely to have to do mentally at any point in his future life again. But, you know, we crack on, we learn how to do these things. Because it's preparing him for that end goal. Now, there was no creativity. There was no real excitement other than when he looked at a pie chart and went, oh, I know how to do this, which was great. Or when he decides, oh, yes, I do want to simplify this fraction, which I'll be honest, is unheard of for my child a few years ago. So I should be celebrating. But I guess what I'm saying is, does that take some of the creativity away from it? Because in early years, in Key Stage 1, we can be really quite play-based and quite exciting in the way that we approach things and do things, because we haven't got this pressure. Like, we will assess them and we will put a level on them at the end of it, but it doesn't really mean anything, certainly not to them. It just shows, are they kind of on track? Are they still doing well? Are they developing well?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's still developing like biologically primary skills. And that's the way I kind of think about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, the kind of there's still interpersonal skills that you're trying to develop at that stage, and you're trying to kind of develop simple comprehension, and there's still areas of the brain which are still undeveloped. You know, I'm watching my daughter go through it at the moment, right? And so I can understand why you might have like that play-based kind of learning there, because to a certain extent, those biologically primary skills are sometimes best acquired through that. Do you know what I mean? And then that kind of that free flow kind of environment. As we get further up to secondary, look, let's go back to your son revising for SATs, right? Was there a point in the lesson on fractions in where did he learn that? Year 5 or year 6?
Oh, he'd been doing fractions for since year 4 probably.
Yeah, in year 4, was there a point in any of those lessons if your son then forgets it the remainder of his living life? Like, do you know what I mean? So so if your son has not remembered fractions, well then, like, the learning we've essentially just like, and that's it. And obviously the SAT he's revising for a purpose, which is the SAT. But then, if he was to do SATs and never remembered fractions after that, that would also be terrible, wouldn't it?
Well, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because this is going on a slightly tangent of the kind of, there was, I'm sure I saw part of the curriculum review that's come out is about just how much of Key Stage 3 repeats Key Stage 2 content. And how many children in kind of year 7, especially, maybe into year 8 as well, just get turned off or bored because actually the content is pitched, I'm going to say, too low. That's my primary head speaking, you know, in terms of they don't realise to what depth and level we're getting children to be able to reach by the end of year 6 in some of these things. And I think maths is probably a really good example. And I get that it's so hard in secondary because you've got all these children coming from all these different primaries, all with different gaps, all with different areas of strength. And you need to find a way to cover and fill all of them whilst not losing that momentum for it. But it does feel like an area where we could be doing better as a sector from a kind of transition perspective, so that children aren't feeling that way, and that I don't know.
It's interesting. So if what I'm getting at is if maybe there's certain mechanistic things, like your son's doing something which is like essentially mechanistic in learning process, right? Which is why it's not creative, it's not original, it doesn't feel creative. Like we're using processes because look, there's a lot of I'm in the Sweller camp, right, where if you read his paper, learners are quite similar in their learning, with obviously with caveats and variations and stuff like that. But you know, MRI scans show various regions of the brain activating when learning, and they're similar from person to person to person. The process of like assimilating things into working memory, then going into long-term memory, and you know, and overutilization and all that's quite mechanistic. Do you know what I mean? And then and so I guess what I'm trying to get at is, if there's an overemphasis on us being creative and bringing stuff off the page, could we neglect that and then come to the position, like I said, is it acceptable for your son in year 8 to be asked a question about fractions and not remember it ever? Do you know what I mean? Like, and not remember it, like the lesson that never happened, or like, is that acceptable? Like, has learning actually happened there? At which point, like, is it that teacher, obviously, if yes, then that teacher has to do the lesson again, and we do the fractions lesson again, and someone who's done a fractions lesson 3 times in their learning, do you know what I mean? And
but I guess where I'm coming from, is there a difference between I can learn it because I can answer all your SATs questions, I know it and I can apply it when you give me a real life context, and maybe that's the difference in my head between for something to get into that long-term memory and be meaningful, sometimes needs a bit of creativity, you know, kind of. So we talk a lot certainly in maths in primary, about going from the abstract to the concrete, or the, you know, vice versa. So effectively breaking things down into small enough steps so that children can really understand the abstract, so it becomes memorable. And sometimes that's where the creativity has to come in, because actually you can work through all the white rays worksheets in the world, and for some children they're still looking at you like you've got 3 heads, and you go, it's okay, I just need to find a way to break this down even more, to make this even smaller, to kind of really get you to understand what this means. And then it gets to a certain point in year 6 where you just go, and here's the method. Okay, children, and here's what you need to do. And if you see something that says mean, what I want you to do is add them all up and then divide them by how many there are. You know, and it becomes procedural, rather than kind of necessarily having an understanding of what we actually mean by average, or mean average. So I don't know. I think there's probably an argument for both. I think there's an argument for sometimes, and I think what you said about kind of adaptation probably comes into this. And sometimes we, as a profession, have got into this kind of primary, I'll speak from what I know, situation where we used to differentiate about 7 different ways, and we're now going, maybe that isn't quite the right way. And some of the adaptations that were for children with special educational needs or who couldn't access things, we're now starting to go, what if I allowed other children to access that? What if I did it? What if I stripped it back and went, you know, like a classic example is having visuals next to a glossary, right? So there was a time when Key Stage 2 glossaries would just be words for these children. And then we've gone, do you know what? For some of our special educational needs, having some imagery, some symbols, something alongside that might be helpful for them. And then we've stepped back and gone, so who wouldn't that be helpful for? In honesty, having a symbol next to the word as well as a definition, just tell me why that wouldn't be helpful for all children to have. And I think it's sometimes about seeing things a little bit differently and going, actually, how could all children access this? And then we just look at it a bit differently, which I think your point in terms of, can creativity lead to adapting things so that children can access learning being a requirement and a positive.
But let's explore that. So if you think about it, there's a lot of research on dual coding, right? And how dual coding can help children access information better. And that's just learning science applied effectively in the classroom. Do you know? So, you know, it's whether that it's interesting. Is that creativity? Do you know what I mean? Like, and maybe if we're a little bit, look, and then And then you take that and you go, right, well, now every glossary has to have some sort of images for dual coding on it, right? Or something along those lines. So we take that and then that's mandated, right?
Does it stop being creative then?
No one's come up with it. No one's come up with it, right? No one's come up. It suddenly becomes mandated across the school. And then I see the counter argument for the fact that it should be creative, this profession. Why are you strangle holding me by saying that I need to do this and I need to do that, I need to do the other? Do you know what I mean? And you go to some schools where like essentially like there's a do it like this or and there's no room for your personal interpretation of this. And I see it from the flip side. I do. So as you can see, I'm not completely.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be terrible to work in that circumstance. But I think what it comes down to. So I like this idea, right? Often people see like artists as people who just come up with something out of nothing, you know, like they just they've produced this piece of work. You forget that like a musician has knowledge of like notes and musical theory and like this wonderful knowledge base to then springboard from, and then they can start to innovate and be creative from there, right? Someone, you know, even Jackson Pollock, like it seems like dots on a page, but he has a really good understanding of color theory and like image formation and things like that. Do you know what I mean? And he's studied fine art, and that's why he's able to produce the images that he does, and it looks like he's just throwing some paint on a page, right? And I think this is the worry and this is the misconception when it comes to like classroom practice. So there's two things, right? You can throw someone in the classroom and go, oh, just be creative about it, bring that curriculum off the page. And they've got none of that knowledge.
Yeah.
They've got none of that understanding. And like, then they are literally just throwing paint at a page, or they're standing on the desk saying, oh, captain, my captain, right? Like, and no one learns nothing. No one learns anything for months and months and months. And then kids come out with no knowledge with which to work in the world or manipulate the world around them or to change the world around them. They come out powerless, right? Or there's the other side of it where you just go, just do it like this because this is what you're supposed to be doing. And someone just goes and like operates procedure in the classroom and walks away at the end of the day and goes, yeah, I did it. And we get a similar situation, right? You get, instead of this time, you get lethal mutation. You get like the procedure operated regardless of what happens. No adaptation. You know, these are two extremes of our profession, really. And people, and then once again, you get classrooms where children, well, no, this is an interesting question. Do people learn more in that classroom?
Well, I guess it's what they're learning. Like, and I guess this is slightly where it touches back into knowledge and skills. And that in the one where they're just literally going through procedure, most people will come away with more knowledge, but you'll probably have some who've got nothing and others who've got lots, right? So those who were engaged and could cope with that kind of level of information being transmitted in that way, I guess, would come away with a lot. The throw everything at and see what sticks kind of approach is probably going to have overall lower results, but maybe everyone will have learned something. There's probably a bit of a here, there and everywhere. I often wonder in primary, if we were to do away with the kind of concept of greater depth and the need to really push children right to the end of their limits, what learning would look like. Like, would we try and push so hard to cover so much? If actually the aim was, as the government once said, 97, 98% to get expected, which obviously can't happen while they set the pass rates. But if that was genuinely what they wanted, was that, as close to 100% as possible could achieve expected, well, that's only possible if you take away this extra additional pressure. And some children wouldn't learn as much. Like, that's just a fact. But would it be worth it if everyone got to a good level? And like, that's a philosophical perspective that different people will have. But I think it pays into what approach you use and why and where. And like you say, I guess you've probably hit the nail on the head there. For some subjects, creativity is essential. Like in music, in art, in drama, in technology, like without that level of creativity and without giving and equipping children with those specific skills, they are going to struggle. They might be able to go through the motions. Like, so I could produce a composition, right? It wouldn't be anything to write home about. It wouldn't be phenomenal. My best ever music lessons have been teaching using GarageBand and technology, where children have headphones in and they kind of just play and make some wonderful music. And that is fine. I can teach music in two ways. That's my creative. And the other is right, we've all got these instruments and we're going to play these notes in this order and then it will sound good kind of level. Because my confidence isn't at a place where I can be creative with both, because I like children to feel like they've really achieved something by the end of it, and normally that means something that sounds good. And so like it takes a skilled professional to be able to take the children with a total range of musical abilities and give them that creativity, and then just come alongside and push and gently steer towards things that when they all come together work really well. And I think it's that sense of, to be, a really skilled creative in some subjects really shows. And you can teach some of that, but some of it is probably experience as well.
Yeah, experience has got a lot to do with it, hasn't it? But what worries me, like once again, I want it to be codified. I don't know why. Well,
but I think maybe that's why you teach science, not music, right?
No, but even in music, do you know what I mean? Like, it's really difficult because, like, I want a music teacher, obviously, but I don't see I struggle with that parallel. So music and science, there's awe in both of them, right? There's artistic awe in both of them.
Absolutely.
I don't really pit them on opposite sides of a coin, right? They're the two sides of the same coin, realistically. But there's so much knowledge that goes into being a good musician. Do you know what I mean? There's so much knowledge that goes into it. And I think that people underappreciate, because the performative aspect is like literally the performative aspect is taken at face value. And no one really sits and thinks, well, oh my God, that person's like practice for hours. They appreciate the each note, and they appreciate the timings, etc., etc., etc. And like, having studied a bit of music myself, I totally appreciate it. The more knowledge you have, the better it becomes. And I kind of want my teacher to be using a procedure with me, right? Because when I've not had a teacher who does that, it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating, when a teacher's like, oh, okay, today we're gonna do a bit of this, kids, and I can appreciate that. You need a bit of that every now and then. Do you know what I mean? You need a bit, but when it's all through that mechanism of like, we're just gonna do this today. Do you know what I mean? It's really frustrating as a learner to be in that position.
Hi, secondary school teachers. We're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Yeah, and I guess that's the differences to my limited. I got up to about grade 5 on a musical instrument, was that actually in a small group or in a one-to-one situation, you can really skillfully do that, right?
Yeah.
Like you can teach someone something and then they go away and practice that and have to put in that practice, and you notice the difference when they come back. In a whole class environment, in terms of how you get them to that point, it's hard, right? Like, but I do absolutely take on board what you're saying in terms of, yeah, there's a real skill and knowledge of music that leads up to a performance or a piece or something that you're doing. I'd love to come back to the kind of awe side of that, right? Because I think that's really key to some of this kind of concept of creativity, because I absolutely passionately think there is a place for awe and wonder in our curriculum. And in primary, I want children to have those moments of awe across loads of different subjects across the year. So actually they discover what really excites them about learning.
Yeah.
And I guess that for me is a little bit sometimes where staff's autonomy comes into this, because in primary, when you're teaching so many different things, there are certain areas that, you know, as an individual, you're really passionate about, right? So maybe it's the environment, and then that comes across whenever you're teaching science or geography or various things like that, that actually you can just, like, and I've seen it happen in classes where, you know, a teacher's really passionate, or even history. You know, we've got an incredible TA whose history knowledge is phenomenal, and you just see this person come to life whenever you give them that opportunity to kind of take a little bit of ownership of what's going on. And sometimes that's learning outside the classroom, or sometimes it is just the kind of day-to-day lessons, but you just see something that is really hard to teach, actually. That is really hard to capture, because it's kind of what makes them who they are, and that just comes across when they're in that environment. And actually the beauty of being a child and working through a school is that you see lots of different teachers who have got lots of different skills and passions, that bring different areas of life, of the curriculum, to life for them throughout their time in the school. But I think, yeah, how do you codify that sense of awe and that bringing that learning off the page? Maybe your challenge there, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Do you know what I mean? And this, like, we sometimes get people who can't do that. Like you do, and it's really difficult. You go and watch them, and they're making all the right moves in the classroom and stuff, but it's just that, like, the knowledge is being moved from one person's mind into another, right? But there's does it have meaning, which then gives the information the awe, right? So look, even the smallest thing in the science curriculum can be full of awe, I think. Do you know what I mean? Or let's take the music curriculum. It's like, I love timing signatures. They're superb. There's so much awe and wonder that comes from a timing signature. The individual bits of knowledge, when you add them up, become quite a wonderful thing. Like, and you kind of explore it, and the more and more you explore it, and it's something crazy. It's just counting out time, right? But often, how do you bring that out to someone? Do you know what I mean? Or how do you get someone to see that? Or as a head of department, how do I get my whole department to see that almost every piece of knowledge in your curriculum you can use to creatively inspire and bring awe to children, and when it makes a whole, suddenly the wheels click together and the children go, wow, that's amazing. Like, what it'd be really nice to teach, to know how to teach someone that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To get someone to, but what I think it comes down to this appreciating the whole process. Do you know what I mean? I love I'm working quite heavily recently from Josh Goodrich's model of like, does the person have the insights? Do they have the awareness? Do they have the correct habits in place to then make that happen? Do they have the steps and the goals? Do you know what I mean? That the coaching model, because it's a really nice thing to think about. Do you know what I mean? I think quite often where creativity misfires is like the person just doesn't have the knowledge to innovate effectively enough. So you see like an ECT in a classroom, or not even an ECT, you might see like a teacher who's well established, like using questioning like really, really badly, but in a really creative way. Like I've experienced this, I've seen someone, do you know what I mean? Like, and you go, and you go, no one's learning anything. There's 20 minutes of questioning going on, and like they're being quite creative in their questioning. You know, they've been talking about this, and they've been talking about that, and this experience from like this child's life, and blah blah blah. But the salient knowledge points haven't actually landed, and the children walk away. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's someone who's being quite creative in the classroom, and then like, but the insight isn't there with the creativity, which means that in the end, the learning, the one, it's what we came down from the start, the first point, right? If you walk away and you can't remember that, then what was the point? Like it's 20 minutes of a child's life wasted. And if you do that 20 minutes 5 times a week, we're onto a high cost here. And then you multiply that by 28 children. Do you know what I mean? So that's really what I'm getting at when it comes to, and so like there's two things that we're thinking about here, isn't there? It's like how do you codify creativity, and does that, and how do you get people to have enough insight to be creative in the correct ways? Because this is what I'm saying, really, like the artist doesn't just pick up a brush. Well, not many artists just pick a brush and make like a timeless piece of art. Generally what they do is they study and they iterate and they learn their craft, and do you know what I mean? Like a glass blower doesn't just make this wonderful piece of glass and it's amazing and beautiful, and then like there's years and years of study that goes into it, and an understanding of how the material works, and I think creativity in our profession must stem from really, really good insights into how learning happens before we move on.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think it's interesting because you talk about Josh Goodrich, and all the kind of responsive coaching is really interesting, right? Because sometimes I think people think that's about removing autonomy, like, and I think partly because when you've got a weak teacher, that coaching model does turn into tell, really, because actually you don't get very far if you're struggling with someone to try and get them to elicit what they just don't know isn't going to be effective. But actually it's how you move someone into that kind of partial or strong perspective where you are asking those right questions and guiding them, and then allowing them to kind of move their own knowledge forward, that ultimately should still hold on to that autonomy, but moving everyone together to a stronger place. Does that make sense?
Like, so autonomy is great until people like fail. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's brilliant until you've got an ECT in a classroom who hasn't got a clue, and the class is doing badly week in, week out. And let's face it, that person's going to be more likely to leave the profession because they walk out on a Thursday afternoon going, "Did I have any impact today?" Do you know what I mean?
Success makes you motivated, doesn't it? If you know you're doing a good job, you're more likely to stay in it. And
I honestly think this is why people leave our profession, because you could walk out on Thursday afternoon and then people just, you know, and then to talk about our profession being a creative profession and solely that, and like, oh well, and then to present kind of the alternative as a monster to that. Do you know what I mean? Like, which is understanding the science of learning and applying it effectively in the classroom so that kids know and remember more subsequently. Do you know what I mean? And then I think that builds towards bringing it, you know, and you can expand that to having meaning, to understanding and like bringing meaning to the world around them through using the way that the kids naturally pick up information from, like, you know, from a neural perspective. I think you can posit that as the beast that works against creativity, but I think it's the opposite. I think it's the beast that works with creativity, that creativity rides on, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's just about seeing it as it could be, not as it should be. Like, So I think there's something there that's saying, actually, if we get creativity right, then I guess there is a bit of planning for it, right? Yeah. Like there's been meaningful thought through opportunities where we can take this learning further. We can allow space and the sense of recognizing what it looks like. We can give children that opportunity to use and apply what they've learned in different contexts, which is sometimes all you need to be creative. Like, just to be able to take something that you've done and understood and be able to show that you've understood that in a different context is something that you can plan for and make time and space for, that encourages flexibility and creativity. You know, I'm thinking a lot of the kind of assessment work that we've been doing over this last year is going, let's not wait right till that last week and assess, because then we've got a load of information that we do absolutely nothing with. What if after 4 weeks we stopped and paused and did a kind of mini assessment, and then we actually looked at that information and went, right, so do you know what we're going to do for the next 2 weeks? We're going to do something based on that, because actually something really critical hasn't landed, and we need to make sure that everyone's got that piece of information or that knowledge or that kind of understanding in order to feel confident they've achieved the objectives we want to in this topic. You know, and we do this in maths and literally all the time because we've just got specific narrow objectives, but across our wider curriculum, we've just hit pause a little bit and gone, right, but what are we actually doing that for? And you know, if they have got it and they have understood everything, brilliant, because then we can really take them further and really stretch them. And I guess it might not sound it, but that's feels like creative thinking going on. And it requires teachers to look and think and plan differently in terms of where they're going. But it is something quite structured that you could show and codify, I guess, to use your terms.
But it's also underpinned by really good understanding of assessment theory, right?
Yeah.
like I think that's the big thing. Like, if you're going to be creative, you need to have all these things in mind, and you should also understand what the procedure is around it. And this is where the parallel comes with the surgeon, right? The surgeon is creative. It's when procedure needs to deviate. Do you know what I mean? Or
yes, and they don't expect to see something happens.
Yes,
they're not just going to go, oh, can't do anything about it.
And they don't.
Sometimes they do have to.
I'm going to do a quick ad read. So this show is brought to you with John Catt Educational, in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development day and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. There we go. Guys, also, I know we've only got about 6 minutes left, but do pitch in. This is live, remember? So do let us know your thoughts and ideas on this. Yeah, so that the assessment is what you've done there is creative, but it's underpinned by really, really sound knowledge of like a procedure and stuff. So maybe, do you know what I mean? I like to see our profession as more creative, akin to like a surgeon, doctor, lawyer, glassblower. I quite like that idea. Do you know what I mean? Glassblowing is quite a big thing. I think I chose that because it's I don't know.
I always want to ask why, but I'm always scared to ask why glassblowing is such a big thing.
It's really interesting because I had to think about it. Like, could you go into a glassblowing workshop and blow some glass today? No. Can I? No. Why? Because I need someone to go do it like this first for a long time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I need someone to go, yeah, you do it like this, put it in now, take it out now, roll it at this point, blow into it at this point. No, wait. Do you know what I mean? You need so much direct instruction on what you are doing before I can go into that workshop and go, this is well, I haven't really explained this before. Before I can go, all right, well, I'm going to make a vase in the shape of a tulip. Do you know what I mean? So, like, there's so much knowledge involved there, and I think that's why I chose that, because you could possibly pick up a paintbrush and just start putting color on a canvas, whereas there's a profession where like it looks, you know, it looks overall creative, but actually to get there there's been a really, really codified process.
Yeah, and I think that's the same as the composition, music, and performing you're talking about. There is a large level of knowledge that you need to have and be confident with before you can then pick that up and be inspired and allow your own creativity to come into force.
Yeah, you need
right?
to
And actually, yeah, exactly. And actually, what we need to do in schools and education is prepare children with all that knowledge and skill and understanding so that they are then equipped to be able to be creative themselves, to be able to use and apply that for themselves. And actually, maybe that's where there's not so much of a difference between primary and secondary, right? Like we might be getting them to different places and different times, and the level of knowledge is going to look different, and the expectation of what they can do with that is going to be greater in secondary. But actually, that concept, it probably goes back to the phonics, like if we get those basics right and we teach them in that really structured way how to read, well, then what we're doing is equipping and preparing them to be able to be creative and now go and choose what type of book you would like. You might choose just to read comics or newspapers or, or David Walliams. But if that's your choice, then that's what you are able to go and do. We're just providing you with the skills to be able to enable you to make those choices going forward.
Sorry, my parents have got a house phone. Who has one of those now?
Oh, that's impressive.
I know, right? It's old school here. But I mean, look, also, like there's a specific way of doing fluency, of teaching. Do you know what I mean? There's some knowledge behind teaching fluency, behind teaching comprehension. Do you know what I mean? And there are some motions that a teacher has to go through before they can start to get a bit innovative and a little bit creative with how to teach that, right? Like you don't just dive in and do what you want initially. I think that I think in our profession, I think what I'm arguing for, because I'm not saying we're not creative, but I think what I'm really where I've got round to in talking to you and thinking about this is there's some motions that you have to go through before you can get to the point where you become creative. So you've got, but also those motions shouldn't be just gone through like slavishly. And just like without
they should be well thought out and planned for, and
you should have the
absolutely.
insight, like Josh Goodrich said. You should have the insight so that you're able to execute them effectively, so you're not just going through the motions. And then you have, like, when you see an ECT, I've had the pleasure of mentoring like several ECTs, like quite a few ECTs over my time, and when you see an ECT take something and make it their own, you go, it's generally because but they start by going through the motions, don't they?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
then it's generally they've just got like a brilliant insight into how children are learning. They've done they've done their work behind it. Do you know what I mean? And this is what I worry about when people say, "Oh, it's a creative profession." just let us get on with it. Do you know? Let us have the canvas and let us paint. It's a bit of a worry when people say that for me.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the crux of it, is that actually creativity, yes, but creativity using the knowledge and skills that you've prepared children for so that they can be really effective in their own kind of creativity. Because actually, it hasn't just been a lesson one, let's crack on, because it's a bit like, I don't know if they were a thing in secondary. We used to start most topics with a what I know, what I want to know. And at the end of it, you'd come back and write what you discovered, right? Well, either they're going to write down everything they already know, which might be what you planned for, and then good luck and teaching them something new, or what they want to know, which isn't what you planned for. So we're not going to learn that either. It's just a kind of a slightly bizarre opportunity thing to do. Unless you do it well in advance, so you can then take all 30 of those children's perspectives into mind and plan specifically for it, which in reality is quite tricky.
Never going to have to. We're going to have to wrap up there, Claire.
Yeah, indeed. No,
That's
it's been great.
This. Yeah, brilliant. Well, we're back on the usual scheduled timing, I think, next month, aren't we?
I think we should be.
So join us next month. I think that'll be, let me just double check.
Will it be 13th?
Yes, it'll be the 13th. No,
13th.
Yeah.
Of May?
April, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, Wednesday. Hang on.
Wednesday, the 14th of May.
Wednesday, the 14th. I apologise.
So join us at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, the 14th of May, in our usual slot, for another exciting and inspiring show. and don't forget to tune into all of the other Teachers Talk stuff. There's some superb stuff out there. I don't know if you've been listening to Claire, but there's been some brilliant stuff over the last week. So don't forget to go back, listen to the stuff that's there. Don't forget to tap into other people's shows. It's brilliant. Right. Well, I will see you next month, Claire.
Yeah. Take care. Have a good week. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.